Thanks, everyone. Yeah, I'm here to share Backstage Software Templates and some lessons learned that I've kind of picked up in the course of my interactions with Backstage. My name's Ryan Jarvinen. I'm from Red Hat, and so there's some Red Hat logos on my slides, but Backstage itself is a CNCF project. So hopefully the information in this session ought to be usable by anyone who's using Backstage, whether they got their Backstage from Red Hat or not. So I'll hopefully ask me any questions if it's not clear, but I'll try to reinforce that piece of information. So what I wanted to cover today first was kind of a little bit of motivation for why Backstage and a look at application complexity in a cloud-native world. And then take a quick look at what is Backstage. How many people already know about Backstage? Looks like most of you. Okay, I'll speed through that section. And then we'll get into Backstage Software Templates, or as they have previously been called, Golden Path Templates. I think that name, Golden Path Templates, is kind of falling out of fashion, but for historical reasons, I have it listed in here. And then within those software templates, we'll look at three specific areas. There's a set of inputs that we're going to investigate, some scaffolding that'll happen, and then we'll look at some outputs. And then I'll go into, we'll see if we have time for Q&A. I'll try to do a demo of some scaffolding if the demo environment holds up. So let's see if we see how lucky we are. So traditionally, if you were a software developer, you might start off building an app with something simple. Especially years ago, you'd start off with just a source code repo, or you'd grab an editor and a compiler, and you'd say, great, here's my source. You throw it over the wall to the other team, and off you go, right? That's your release process is pretty simple. But over time, things have kind of evolved, right? Now developers may need to use something like containers. They may be using Podman or more likely maybe Docker. They're going to need a container registry to push that container image to. They're going to need a place to run containers, like a Kubernetes cluster or some sort. They're going to need a CD to deploy this. They're going to need a lot of YAML to capture all of these different abstractions they're adding in, and a place to store all the code and all the YAML. And don't forget to shift security left, or whatever else you're trying to shoehorn into this process. And pretty quickly you can get devs that are very overwhelmed by the CNCF landscape and all that's going on there as they try to conceptualize 1,000 different of these components and keep it all straight in their head. You run out of memory bandwidth, and if you bring them Backstage and you say, oh, hey, how about just one more YAML, they may already be at their limit, right? So, in fact, I found this kind of funny. I found this posted online. Sorry for the quality of the screenshot, but this was a sentiment from another conference. Someone posted this in a bathroom or something and was saying, they give us these added weight, essentially, well, all I really need is FTP. I just want to ship my files. This person clearly has got an oversimplified view of how to deal with technology these days. But you could definitely find folks that have a severe backlash to all the added YAML that they're having to absorb and keep track of. This is a study from Salesforce Productivity Survey. They said 76% of organizations say cognitive load is so high that it's a source of low productivity. So developer portals are supposed to, are designed to target this in a variety of different ways. It improves onboarding, coding time, build time, run time, variety of different optimizations, and hopefully is going to allow you to enable developer self-service via your platform and allow different tools and technologies to be glued together and offered in a way that's easy for developers to adopt without having to worry about what are the best practices, what are the security guidelines, how do I maintain or improve this thing over time. It's all going to be spelled out for them so they could kind of follow along with a golden path experience. So Backstage is I know you folks already know what Backstage is, but for the folks on video, I'll go real shortly into Backstage was started by Spotify. I asked someone at Spotify about how big their software catalog was at Backstage, and they said they had something like over 100,000 components in their software catalog. That's a very large organization with a very flat structure if they have all that visibility, right? And that may be what you want to achieve. You may also want to try to lock down Backstage into different kind of siloed experiences and add some RBAC or other kind of precautions in there as well. But started at Backstage, or started at Spotify as a way to help organize all of these hundreds of thousands of different web services that they were trying to maintain and manage. And people really had an issue with trying to find out what was running in production, how do they use it, how do they adopt it, is it safe to adopt? Anyway, their approach really resonated with a large number of folks in the industry, and there's been a good deal of adoption for Backstage. A lot of different companies jumping in and participating, either using it or participating in the ecosystem. Backstage is going to come with a centralized software catalog to keep track of all of your different services, websites, libraries, data pipelines, etc. Plugins are going to be a major part of Backstage. They're going to integrate with each of your different pieces of infrastructure and provide visibility to your users. We'll see examples of that a little bit later in the demo. Software templates are going to give you ways to quickly spin up new projects and standardize your tooling. And tech docs, easily create, maintain, and work on documents in a kind of docs as code style. Last thing we have is search. Then this is kind of my main selling points for Backstage. Is this list here. Search, having an integrated search system is pretty cool. This will, I think, as far as I know, indexes not just your source code, but also all of the tech docs as well, making everything very easily discoverable for folks. So Red Hat also has its own version of Backstage, a kind of an enterprise version of Backstage, known as Red Hat Developer Hub. There's a couple differences here. It has more, I guess one of the main differences is the way we manage plugins. With RHDH is kind of a dynamic plugin system. So you have little kind of dip switches or checkboxes. You could kind of flip a switch over and say, I'd like to install Tekton Pipelines plugin. You flip the switch, it installs in the background, and then it's up and running without you having to rebuild Backstage from source or rebuild a new container and deploy the container. And it's I don't know, I think the dynamic plugins is my major selling point that I'd list there. Let's see. So on to Backstage Software Templates. If you want to see the upstream documentation, this is your link to the upstream, backstage.io/docs features software templates. That's where I go anytime I get really deep and need follow-up advice. That's your key to the upstream docs. They may or may not, you may or may not see the words golden path mentioned in those docs. That was a big part of how Spotify described templates historically. And so what is this golden path? They didn't ever really define it very clearly. They kind of mention golden paths in a bunch of different areas, but don't really give it a clear definition. So here's my attempt at trying to define these golden path or software templates. It's a self-service workflow primarily. It's a means of reducing that cognitive load for developers and without abstracting away any context and underlying tools and technologies. And it allows people to get started with new projects while following best practices. So, template example number 1. Let me see, here is not the tab I was looking for, or is it? This is the tab I was looking for. All right, so I have some experience with Backstage. Me and a couple coworkers actually put a book on Backstage together. And so the template examples I'm going to walk you through today are examples from that we put together in this book. The source code is available on GitHub. You could find it under the Developer Hub Books org. And so I'm going to go into this org and click on the RHDH Book 1 templates repo, and we'll look at this Quarkus with Angular template. So a couple things to notice about this template. There's the template YAML, but then right next to it I also have another folder here. It's called Skeleton. This has a source code repo. And this other folder called Manifests, this has all the YAMLs for my ArgoCD, my deployment YAML, my all the different YAML manifests that Kubernetes is going to expect, and Tekton and ArgoCD and my other services. This whole repo is basically going to get handed off to ArgoCD to deliver the workloads. This whole repo is going to get added into GitLab, and this template is going to describe our process on how we do that. So you could see right up top here we have this viewable by everyone. We've got a API version, a kind. This is commonly referred to as a group version kind declaration, these first 2 lines here. And it may be familiar, this kind of format may be familiar to you if you've used Open API spec in the past. This is what Kubernetes uses, so it looks like you might be able to stuff this template into a Kubernetes CRD or something. I have seen kind of experimental support for that, but it's not supported yet, adding these into Kubernetes, right? But you basically, this is the scaffold, this is the YAML that we're going to start with. You can see the name here is, or actually let's look at the title. We're going to look for something called Quarkus Service with Angular front end. You could see there's some tags on here. And let's take a look at how this will look in Backstage. So this right here is my live instance of Red Hat Developer Hub, which is our Backstage. I'm going to click on Create to take a look at the templates that are available, and I'll look for that Quarkus with Angular front end that we saw in the right here, Quarkus service with hosted Angular front end. Got it. So I'll hit, you could see that string of text matches up across there. I'll hit choose, and we will get into the first page of our template here. This is going to ask us to provide information about the GitLab location. If I scroll down a little bit, I could see that's the first in our spec. We have 4 different inputs here. The first input is going to be providing information about the GitLab location, like we said. So I'll just accept the defaults that we've loaded in. I'm going to use the development org. And for the owner, let's say believe I'm user 8. This could also be owned by a team more appropriately. It may be your front-end dev team or your, I don't know, some particular product team that owns this rather than an individual user. But and I'm going to deploy this to the demo 8 namespace in Kubernetes. Next step on here is I'm going to provide some information about this new component. Oh, that's what I just went through. That was the demo 8 namespace that I added in. I did this owner selector and pulled out a user attribute. And then next one is providing build information. So let's get down to this build information. This one's going to accept a registry host and a tag. Looks like the default value is going to be latest. So let's see. Looks like we've got that. We could review all of these things that we would like to start off this new user with their getting started experience. And then here's the scaffolding process. First thing it's going to do is pull out, actually, we'll step through each of these. Let's see, step through each of these over here. So this is listed as the steps section. I wanted to point out each of these action steps. So the first action is to fetch a template. It's going to look at that skeleton folder and try to add in all of these different values that we just collected from the user and template them into the source code directory. Then we're going to use this publish GitLab action in order to publish that source to our GitLab repo. If you had GitHub instead, or if you were using GitHub instead, there's also a publish GitHub action. You can find that in the upstream documentation. But I'll just walk through quickly the different actions we have here. Next thing we're going to do is fetch a template, another template that's going to be used to template out those manifests for ArgoCD. Here's the values that we're going to inject into ArgoCD. That'll go to our GitOps tenant. And then we'll publish that to GitLab as well. Once that's published to GitLab, we'll end up with some new source code, right, that we can register into Backstage. So the source code repo should get registered, and we actually have two that get registered since there's a Quarkus and Angular component. And then the last step we do is this ArgoCD create resources action, and that's going to ship everything to Argo. So that'll get us down to this output section, which has links. So let's see, these links right here were all introduced because I have defined them in the template. So if you want custom links for your developers at the end of a workflow, you can use, like you could see here, I have the parameters cluster ID is injected into the string here. There's a output from one of the steps injected into the URL here. So why don't I go through to the source code repository, and we can see what was published. So here's my new repo. This was just published 2 minutes ago, so just got scaffolded out for us. This was what was in that skeleton folder before, right? And cataloginfo.yaml is one of the main files that this is what gets registered back to Backstage. And this also has that open API spec, kind of group versioning kind up top. The kind is component, and you could see in here, here's the links that we had in the template that now have the actual cluster ID injected into the string so the templating actually worked, or the scaffolding actually worked, right? Here's the value injected in. And we can go, here's a link right to the source code, or we could also open up the components either directly there or from the software catalog. So here's the Quarkus components. Each of these tabs is generally powered by one of the Backstage plugins that we have. So I mentioned there's a plugin for Tekton. That's going to be underneath this CI tab. So if I click on the CI tab, I could see we have a pipeline run that's in progress here. I could go to the CD tab, and this is data from ArgoCD. I don't have to provide any login to ArgoCD or any special access. My developer can go in, scaffold out their repo, and immediately get to work and automatically have Argo set up. If they need to check the status, they go right here to Backstage. They could see everything that's happening with their pipeline, their deployments. This is Kubernetes tab is provided by the Kubernetes plugin. This particular component also has an API, and so if I scroll down a little farther in this catalog YAML, or catalog info, you could see we introduced a separator and then this API. So this also has a API that's discoverable and findable via this API tab as well. And this basically gives you like an open API spec interaction with the component. So I could go in here and I can try out a web request and see what the response is. So pretty cool basic inspection. I can see how this particular component links up to other components and other relationships within Backstage. Let's see. Any other questions about this particular part here? About these different tabs? No? This is the basics of Backstage. If you've already seen Backstage, you're probably already familiar with this piece of the puzzle. So I'll get back to, let's get back to my slides, and I'll see what's next here. So we looked at the Quarkus with Angular repo. We looked at the group version in kind, the metadata, and the spec. We stepped through the parameters, the action steps, and the output. And we took a look at the repos, the catalog info, YAML, and the links area. I took a look, yeah, we already ran this. And we ran through these template action steps. Okay, so the result here is 2 repos, an ArgoCD service that's been installed and deployed, Tekton Pipelines. We should have the OCI registry up there, OCI logo or something, but yeah, and then we're deploying this on Kubernetes. So that's the whole kind of software delivery pipeline that we've established. Let's skip through. Here's kind of a typical developer workflow that's basically been achieved through 2 or 3 clicks and a lot of YAML work, but you know, depending on your scale, if you have enough developers, enough services, onboarding developers, junior developers in this way can be massive. Okay, any questions about, oh, this is more slides than I was thinking. Okay, all right, so any questions about that first part? No? All right, I'll move on to the next step. What happens after you create this template and now something evolves, right? That always happens. You always need to maintain the, now that you've created it, now you're cursed with owning it and maintaining it. That's the sad reality. So let's take a little bit of a look further down the golden path to see if it still looks golden, or if we can maintain its glow in some way. So we'll take a look at this Quarkus application patch template. This is going to be a patch template. Let me see if I can demo this part. I'll go back to the create workflow. I'll pick the Quarkus patch template. And then for the GitLab, let's see, GitLab, what was my repo name? It was this thing. Let's copy this. Okay, and it's in the development org with this repo. It's going to use that as the branch name. This is going to patch a POM XML. It's going to provide an updated version of Quarkus, which is our Java run environment. And it's going to patch the Docker file to have an updated version of OpenJDK. So 2 major Java upgrades that we're going to implement. So I'll hit review. We'll hit create. And then I'll jump back and we'll kind of step through the actions that this one has. Let's go to custom component patch, Quarkus app patch. So this one is going to have, I actually have these steps, I think, in the slides as well, so maybe I'll just step through the slides. But yeah, this is going to fetch the repo, patch the repo, open a merge request or pull request, depending on if you're writing for GitLab or GitHub, and then link to that merge request. So let's go back to our catalog. Let's find that demo 8 map service. And now if I go to issues, we don't have any issues, but if I go to pull requests, now I have a new pull request in here that was from the template run that we just did. And if I take a look at this one, we could see there's some changes, and it looks like that did update our OpenJDK version and our Quarkus version, and make a small change to our POM XML here to include Quarkus small rye health. Okay, cool. Where's the merge button? Overview. Merge. Let's merge this. And then go back and see what happened in our demo. All right. So now if I go back to this, I could see this merge request is now changed to a different color here. And whoops. If I go to the CI tab, I could see there's a new pipeline run that's kicked off. It looks like our last one failed. We could sacrifice that one to the demo gods. And there we go. Any questions about that part there? Yeah. You tell it what, yeah, so the question was basically, this seems brittle, like we're patching something very specific in a file, but what if the developer changed it first? Is that kind of what you were implying? Yeah. I think with this type of workflow, you'd kind of want to identify, hopefully, who's responsible for the Docker file, and who's, you know, you could say, hey, everything in that manifest repo, that's the platform engineering team helps manage, or you go to them to merge your pull request. They at least review changes in the manifest repo or something like that, or in the Docker file. So you could try to have some kind of policy or organizational enforcement. There's also support for more advanced orchestration and review of code changes that's coming into Backstage. What we're looking at today is called the scaffolder, but there's an alternate system that's an orchestrator that has a little bit more capabilities to check first and look for sign-offs and reviews and things like that. So yeah, I would say this is kind of a brittle, let's take a look at the code for this one. This is not the right repo. Let's take a look. Where can I find that code? Okay, here's our patch template. Here is the particular action that we're using to do the replace. This is a plugin from Roadie HQ. So I think you get this when you install the ArgoCD plugin from Roadie. It doesn't just install the back-end plugin and front-end plugin, but I believe also provides some scaffolding capabilities as part of that plugin functionality. And so this is just doing a very, very basic FS replace. It's very hacky. It's going to find a very small string. It should probably be adding some context on either side of this, you know. This one's probably okay to search on because it looks pretty unique. But yeah, this kind of, we put a big warning in here because we were like, yeah, this is a little bit brittle. You could see this. Am I going to need another patch template to update my templates over time? That's basically the direction we went in the book. Was we had 2 patch templates, one to update the application code and another patch template to update all the templates to make sure anyone who came along later down that golden path didn't have to run both templates, that they just got the newer, you know, the newer source. So that's mostly what I wanted to demo for that piece. That covered fetching using that Roadie HQ utils replace call, and then publish GitLab merge request. These are the action steps that you could try to look up in the official docs. Yeah, I said this part was messy. Publish the merge request, and then we found out that there we go. All right, so in summary, to basically capture what we've seen so far, all this YAML can be a little bit overwhelming, especially for new developers. You can rein it in with, and if you tell them only one more YAML, they're probably going to know you're probably lying to them. This has just one more YAML for the template, but then we used a second template, and we, you know, it introduced a lot of YAML behind the scenes, but it was a lot of YAML that our developers didn't have to deal with, right? So hopefully Backstage is like your golden path experience to onboarding developers into the CNCF landscape, and to give them access to all of this good stuff without drowning them in all the details. That's the main idea. So Backstage plugins are going to help provide that real-time view of your application infrastructure, health and security. Backstage helps answer 2 very important questions. What am I running and how do I use it? Software templates are going to provide best practices with GitOps and automation, self-service with guardrails for cloud-native dev, and YAML for platform engineers that helps simplify software delivery for your mainline developers. If you want a lot more examples of more than just what I have from the slides here, we actually have a software templates library. This is available on GitHub. You could search, well, I put a short link here because it's a long URL. So here's the short link, but this will go to a repo we have that has a lot of examples on different template use cases that you might want to use. These aren't always the easiest things to share because usually templates can have a lot of configuration details embedded in the template. So usually I store my templates in a private repo or in GitLab or somewhere secure because it's going to have configuration, host names, things in there that I generally encourage developers not to put in their source code at all. But Backstage, that's the way things are done today, is a certain amount of configuration is going to go into these templates. So they're not the easiest things to share, but here's a lot of great starting points that you could use to kind of build from. Lastly, if you want a copy of this book, if you'd like to read through it, I only have one copy with me here today, but you could get an ebook copy that kind of tells the story of all of what we learned building out that experience. And yeah, definitely give me your feedback and let me know if you would like to see like a live workshop version of this. I have this set up as an interactive workshop you can go through as well. So send me an email if you'd like to see the interactive version deployed somewhere. That's it for me. Any questions? Yeah.
We're just starting to get going with Backstage. We basically just have our initial image built, starting on our first software templates, getting a few of the backend plugins installed, things like that. A thing that we are targeting, one of the targets of Backstage for us is a mechanism to create and maintain or manage like ephemeral environments that are sort of medium length lived, like on the order of a few days, something like that. We have a custom in-house thing that we made, and now we're trying to retire that and replace it with Backstage. And from the things that you've shown, I think I have a good understanding of how to do like the sort of create and update, like through patch sort of scenarios. I was curious about the destruction side, how you might go about doing that. I have been conceptualizing in my head as maybe a separate workflow that is able to like enumerate the catalog info items of things that had previously been deployed that way, so that you could sort of pick one from the list and say, yeah, that's the one I want to get rid of. Is that reasonable, or is there a better approach?
Yeah, there's good question. I think maintaining the content in the catalog is definitely an evolving challenge. I think there's some folks use importer tools to try to bring in a lot of their kind of import existing catalog content from something else and bring it in. So I know there's mechanisms where you might be able to like periodically sync or re-import or do something to kind of maintain your catalog in that way. But also each of these catalog entities, you register with Backstage, they get stored in a database, and there's also a background process that watches GitLab. And so even if you unregister it from Backstage, sometimes the background process can look and be like, oh, I've discovered a new catalog info.yaml. Let me re-register this for you. And I'll have things that I'll like delete out of the catalog that will suddenly reappear because it's using this kind of GitOps, like whatever's in Git is the source of truth. And so in some ways you want to not just unregister, but delete the Git representation of it, and also unregister it. And you could do that in a couple different ways. You could have a template that does something like that, theoretically. Yeah, there's a couple different ways to do that, but that's a challenging. Maintaining the catalog's definitely an ongoing challenge.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, more.
As we're getting started with our software templates, we're noticing that based on input from developers, we need to follow a different branch, ask for different questions, or we'll have different defaults depending on what they've selected in a previous step. So far, our experience says that you can't change further inputs in a service template based on the output from an
Oh,
input?
yeah. So you're asking, like, can you use an input from page 1 as a value on page 4 or
Right.
2 or 3 or something? Yeah, as far as I know, that is not supported currently, and it's a major pain point for me as well. I want to reuse some of the values instead of having to try to chain multiple things to, yeah, it's frustrating. I would take a look at see if the orchestrator has any advantages over the older scaffolder.
Okay.
Because I know that's going to have more functionality in the future.
One of the things I was thinking of is if you could chain the two templates together and have the first one output a YAML file, intermediate step, and then the next one load that YAML file. And
Yeah,
that
yeah.
doesn't seem like a possibility yet either, but I'll look
You could
into
definitely
orchestrating.
have the first one probably add like labels or tags or something or annotations, and then read those annotations and try to make sense of them and use them in a particular way. Yeah.
It's trying to get the developer into that workflow without having to go back and select another.
Yeah, in my experience, that's definitely a pain point for me as well with templates, not being able to recycle those values. And I know that's something that gets brought up upstream frequently.
Okay.
So I don't have a great solution for that other than just add more variability in the template. I get, like you were saying, like they may not be looking for the main branch or the master branch, that there may be some other, like you can have an input that defaults to master or main, but allows them to fill in their branch name.
Right.
And then you get a little bit more flexibility. But then, yeah, you want to reuse whatever that value is. Yeah.
Thank you.
And you could use it during the scaffolding and output, but not as part of the input processing. Yeah.
More questions?
What are some good community resources? Like if I wanted to discuss strategies and stuff like that with people that are using Backstage, is there like an
there's
official?
I think they have a good, there's like a Slack, CNCF Slack for Backstage that's decent. They're pretty active in their chat system, and their documentation is not super rich, but there's a lot there to look at to get started with, I think. So those would be my main two, their kind of community forum or chat and the docs.
Okay, thank you.
Any more questions? Okay, well, thank you very much, Ryan.
Hey, thank you.